see what comes up. After a minute or two. Okay, there we are. Okay, we are there. I'm just going to go ahead and mute so we can do a sound check. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing.
Testing. Testing.
Should I just grab the mic? Testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing. Okay. I think that's pretty good. All right. So this morning we saw the covenants and how the covenants establish not only doctrine, but they establish prophecies such as judgments, whether it be the judgments by wild beast or by each man raising his hand against his brother. We also saw the idea of the prophecy of Israel going into Egypt and then coming out with many of the possessions of the people who had once oppressed them. From there, we saw Jacob's covenant and how before Jacob fulfills the Shabbat Shalom, before Jacob fulfills the promise of being a blessing in the earth, it would be spread to the four corners of the earth. So now what we're going to see is how every single one of those patriarchal covenants are incorporated into the testimony of Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 20. Now, what specifically is the testimony? The testimony in Hebrew is a duth, and it's something that testifies. It testifies either for or against an entity. So if you are obeying the covenant, it's going to testify for you because you're going to have all these incredible blessings. If you're disobedient, it's going to testify against you because all of a sudden you're going to see all these curses in your life and in your land. So that is the concept. Now, the statutes, judgments, commandments, all of those are a different function. They are a different part of the law. So I have a couple things for y'all to look up. Go first to Isaiah. Isaiah 8, verse 16.
What version am I in?
All right. And just whoever wants to read it.
What verse?
Isaiah 8, verse 16.
Find up the testimony, seal the teaching among my disciples.
Okay. So we have two different concepts here, right? We have the teaching, we have the testimony, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now skip down to verse 20.
To the teaching and to the testimony, if they will not speak according to this word, it is because they have no dawn.
Well, it means light. There is no light in them. So there's the idea. Oh, Erin, so glad you're with us. Good to see you and Joanne. So you have this idea that there's the law of Moses and the testimony. These are two separate divisions and functions within the Torah. So what is the testimony and how does it work? The testimony is something that I refer to as the prophetic law because the curses of the law define all prophecy. Not only do they define prophecy, but they define it in a chronological order from the beginning of Israel's history to the latter-day restoration when Jacob becomes a blessing in the earth. Yeah. So when Isaiah says, as we looked this morning, when Isaiah says, behold, who is righteous that we may serve him? You know, who is righteous that we may give him praise? Who has told you the beginning from the end? Have not I, Jehovah? Well, we're going to see just how true those statements are. So, look at Deuteronomy 27, verses 14 through 16. We're not going to read through these, but do make a note of them. I did hand out this page. If you guys are, if you have my book, each of you can follow along on page 700. Believe it or not, this is not the Yahweh Exists book club tonight, but this will actually be something that we will be covering in a couple months in the book club. There is no way. Oh, Sue, I'm so glad you and Horace are here. Great to see you guys. Shabbat Shalom. This is something that really takes a couple classes to go over because there's just so much information. So tonight we're probably going to break the class in at least two parts. So Deuteronomy 27 verses 14 through 26 simply outlines all the blessings that Israel will receive for adhering to Torah. Applied chronologically, this refers to the beginning of the monarchy. You have Saul, where Israel begins to prevail against the Philistines. You have David. You have Solomon. Israel conquers territory. Israel is at peace. It says during Solomon's reign, there was no evil occurrent until the last 5 years of his reign, when he had departed from Yahovah, and then he began to send Ben-Hadad and Egypt against Israel. Good question. Yeah, thank you. So during this time in Israel's history, there is peace. Now, what you will see, Shabbat Shalom, Jeff, so glad you could join us. And this is the same study that we did during Sukkot, so we're doing it again tonight. So with this, there is this idea that Leviticus 26, the covenant specifically given at Mount Sinai, that covenant was very, very broad. It was not detailed. After God led the children of Israel in the wilderness for 40 years, he really got to know them. So by the time we come to the testimony, to the curses in Deuteronomy 28, they begin to become very detailed, and they fill in a lot of the history that is not established in Leviticus 26. What we're going to see, however, is that the very generalized curses of Leviticus 26 totally parallel the curses of Deuteronomy 28. Chronologically, not one of them is out of place. They parallel chronologically. Deuteronomy just fills in a lot more detail. So with that in mind, Deuteronomy 28, actually, let me mention this. Deuteronomy 28, 1 through 14 parallels Deuteronomy 26, 1 through 13. So if you look at what they say, the promises, oh, good evening, James, so glad you're here. Shabbat Shalom. Frozen, is everybody else frozen? Guys, let us know if we come frozen. I think we're good on this end, but just keep me updated. You may have to refresh your screen. So what you find is that the testimony is totally parallel. Nothing has changed. Remember what we saw with the covenants. Not once did God ever rescind or reverse any of the patriarchal covenants, but what he did do is he expanded them. They began to incorporate more information and more promises, more blessings, and more stipulations, such as if you are not circumcised, God will not recognize you as part of the children of Israel. So that is what's happening here. The curses, none of the curses of Leviticus 26 have been changed, but more detail, more information regarding those curses is being filled in. So when we come to now Deuteronomy 28, verses 15 through 21, we find that the curses here are, they are applied. They are outlined, they are defined, and they are divided into 5 parts, which parallel Leviticus 26. Now, have you ever wondered why God always states that he would not rend the kingdom from David's hand, and he wouldn't do it in Solomon's day.
Mhm.
He says, because I've always promised to give David a light, and I won't do it. Well, there's sometimes those statements, there's a little bit more history and a little bit more information in the background than what the prophets bring attention to. It's like they had the information and they know what they're working off of, but because we're separated by time, we've lost what they were working off of. So if you go to, let me look this up real quick. The original one is going to be in Genesis 49. I wanted to find where it said this about David here. Okay. That's not it. Okay. Well, this will reiterate it. In 1 Kings 11, you have where Jehu rends the garment. And in verse 36, it says, to his son, I will give one tribe, that David, my servant, may always have a light before me in Jerusalem, the city that I have chosen to put my name there. So the idea, remember, the garment is ripped into 12 pieces. 11 are given to Jeroboam, and one is left for Solomon and then for Rehoboam. But there's this idea that even though Solomon sinned, the judgment doesn't come in his day, and that kind of seems maybe off for us if the sins don't, if the children are put to death for the sins of their father. Why would this wait? Why would this tarry until Rehoboam's reign? Well, there was actually another prophecy that dictated and kind of preceded this, so you can't go against an original prophecy. So Genesis 49, and this is going to be right around verse 9. So it's actually verse 10. In verse 10, the word for scepter is Shebet. And the word Shebet, 95% of the time, is translated as tribes. So here it states, if, and this is open to debate, but if you take the word Shebet to mean tribes, it says, the tribes shall not depart from Judah, nor a lawgiver between his feet until Shiloh come, and to him shall the gathering of the people be. Well, you find that during Solomon's reign, the tribes were gathered together. They came to Jerusalem. They celebrated Sukkot. They celebrated the dedication of the temple. Shiloh, which means peace, Solomon was a man of peace. There were no wars during his days because David had established his kingdom. So yes, James says it basically means a branch, thus tribe, a sprout, something that comes forth. So if Genesis 49 is prophesying of Solomon, then because Solomon was a man of peace, because it was prophesied that the gathering of the tribes would be to Solomon, that previously spoken word could not be breached. God could not contradict that. So if the tribes were then to be separated from this man of peace, it has to be done after his lifetime. So sometimes understanding that there's prior prophecies or prior promises dictates what God or the prophets will say as we go down the branch or the tree. So now let's go back. Again, the curses actually begin when the tribes depart from Judah. So the fracturing of the kingdom, and the kingdom fractured, let me give you the date. And my dates are a little bit different than traditional scholarship. This is based on just a very detailed study that I did over about 4 years of the chronology of Kings and Chronicles. But you find that the tribes split in two, in 944 BCE. So that right there really begins year zero. So it begins the first year. And what we're going to see is that dates are actually very important because establishes um, Leviticus establishes a chronology, specific time frames that during that particular time frame, certain curses are going to occur for both Israel in the beginning and then eventually Judah. So the first curses that are set to occur, if you look at Deuteronomy 28, verse 22, it says, curses in the field and the fruit in the body and on the increase. So this would have run right around 944 to 874. Now, let's look at what Leviticus states in this verse. So look at Leviticus 26, verses 18 through 20. And if one of you gals want to read that,
Let's say the reference again, please.
Leviticus 26, 18 through 20.
Yeah.
And if in spite of this wait a minute, you will not listen to me, then I will discipline you again sevenfold for your sins, and I will break the pride of your power, and I will make your heavens like iron, and your earth like bronze. Keep on going, right? Where am I going to?
2 verse 20.
I'm sorry. And your strength shall be spent in vain, for your land shall not yield its increase, and the trees of the land shall not yield their fruit. Then, if you walk contrary to me and will not listen to me, I'll continue striking you sevenfold for your sins.
All right. So you find in verse 18, it says, if you will not listen to this, I will punish you 7 times more for your sins. Right. So this implies that if he's doing it 7 times more, there's already been a 7 times because now he's adding to
Yeah.
it. So the previous verses have actually outlined the first 7 times. So the first 7 times occurs in chapters 14 through 17. And this again would have included, for the Israel, it would have included Jeroboam through Ahab. And this is where we find that Israel, the northern kingdom, begins to have to pay tribute of the increase of their land to Assyria. So at the exact point in time where the testimony states that their increase will be given to other kings, it indeed occurs. For Judah, this is Rehoboam through Jehoshaphat. Now you find that the curses fall on the northern kingdom first. And the reason for this, if you guys will remember, do you remember the formatic statement, the formula that is always applied to Jeroboam and applied to Israel? It states that, behold, the children of Israel followed after the sins of Jeroboam, who taught Israel to sin, or they did not depart from the sins of Jeroboam, who taught Israel to sin. So the concept here is that after Jeroboam, the northern kingdom never had this revival. They may have had kings that were less wicked, who didn't abuse them as much, but never once did they ever return to the Torah. So this is why we see the curses falling on Samaria, and they have not yet necessarily fallen on Judah, because Judah is still walking with Jehovah. So the next thing that we see, and let me actually go through this real quick and catch up here. And let me talk a little bit about the 7 times. The 7 times are established in Leviticus 26, but the prophets such as Isaiah and Jeremiah build on this concept. And the concept of the 7 times are 70-year increments. So within that 70-year time period, those specific curses are going to be applied and they will fall on Israel. Isaiah, if you look at Isaiah, let me get the text here. Um, Isaiah 7:8. Does somebody want to read that? This is within the Emmanuel prophecy.
For the head of Syria is Damascus, and the head of Damascus is Rezin, and within 65 years shall Ephraim be broken, that it be not a people.
So Isaiah issues that prophecy right around 734 BCE. It's actually 731 BCE. How did Isaiah know that it would be 65 years until the northern kingdom would be totally deported off the land?
Mhm.
How did he know that?
Mm.
Well, if he looked, what did Isaiah say? What did he say that you had to look for to in order to understand Israel's future or to understand light, to have light? What do you have to look to?
To the Torah and the testimony.
To the testimony. So if you look to the testimony, what is the increment? We know that there's 70 years that are established. Well, if he knew that one 70-year period had already expired and that they were 5 years into that next 70-year period, he knew that only 65 years remained. What does Jeremiah say is the time for Israel to enjoy her Sabbaths on the land?
Hmm.
How many years? 70 years.
Mm.
So
Oh, wow.
70 years for the land to rest and for Israel to enjoy her Sabbaths. So you find this idea of 70 years repeated throughout Scripture. So where do the prophets find this information? They look to the testimony, and that's
Okay.
where they find it. So this, it's actually very straightforward when you see how it's applied. So now I wanted to look at and I want to read through some of these because I want you to see how closely they mirror each other. So if somebody wants to read Deuteronomy 28:22, and then somebody else read Leviticus 26:14 through 17.
Okay, Deuteronomy 28:22.
Mhm.
The Lord shall smite thee with a consumption and with a fever and with an inflammation and with an extreme burning and with the sword and with blasting and with mildew, and they shall pursue thee until thou perish.
All right. Now, somebody want to read the Deuteronomy 28:22.
That's what I just read.
Okay, you read. Okay, then read Leviticus 26:14 through 17.
14 through 17. But if you will not listen to me and will not do all these commandments, if you spurn my statutes, yeah, and if your soul abhors my rules, so that you will not do all my commandments, but break my covenant, then I will do this to you. I will visit you with panic. I don't like this version. I'm sorry. With wasting disease and fever that consume the eyes and make the heart ache, and you shall sow your seed in vain, for your enemies shall eat it. I will set my face against you, and you will be struck down before your enemies. Those who hate you shall rule over you, and you shall flee when none pursue you.
Okay, now is that just verse 16 and 17? Okay, 14 through 17. Perfect.
Okay.
All right, perfect. What I want to draw your attention to are the similarities in the curses. Deuteronomy 28:22 mentions consumption, fever, inflammation, extreme burning, the sword, blasting, and mildew. Okay, those are for specific things. Leviticus 26, verse 16 mentions terror, consumption, burning argue, and your seed will be in vain because your enemies will eat it. It's saying the exact same thing.
Yeah.
It is saying the
bad.
exact same thing. Now, sit upon, which is translated blasting, specifically means disease of crops. So that could be, black spot. It could be mold, mildew. I mean,
Right root.
exactly, exactly. Now, what's fascinating is that Micah actually states that in previous times that God has done this before his day. That he says, when God had blighted our crops, when God had put blasting on us, as though it had occurred before he had prophesied to Israel. What's also interesting is that we have the first record, perhaps, of a fever in Israel at this point in time with Jeroboam. His son is sick. The wife goes to the prophet and says, "Will my son be healed?" And the prophet says, "When you enter the city, he will die." Now, it doesn't specifically say that that was a fever, but if the child was sick, what we know that usually accompanies an illness, especially a virus, a fever. So we see all of this beginning. We don't have any record of that occurring before this time in Israel's history. But now we do. In this particular 7 times period, we have evidence of this occurring. Now, I will say, in my book, I do go through this in a whole lot more detail, but I'm just going to give the overview tonight so that way you can see the pattern and then search for yourselves. So, all right. So now let's go to the next phase. We're going to see rebuke, pestilence, and famine. This is going to be correlate with the kings of Samaria of Ahab through Jehoash, for Judah, Jehoshaphat through Amaziah. So this will be the second times fulfilled. So if somebody will read Leviticus 26, 18 through 20, and if you have it in the KJV uses a lot of the same terminology. And then somebody else, Deuteronomy 28, 23, and 24.
Which one do you want first?
Let's do Leviticus 26, 18 through 20.
And I'll do Deuteronomy.
All right. Unless, Kay, do you want to do Deuteronomy?
It doesn't matter.
Okay. All right. So if you'll do Leviticus and then.
It's 18 to 20, 26.
Mhm.
26. Okay.
For Deuteronomy, it's going to be 23 through 24.
Okay. We're doing Leviticus 26, 18 right now.
So yes.
If also after these things you do not obey me, then I will punish you 7 times more for your sins. I will also break down your pride of power. I will also make your sky like iron and your earth like bronze. Your strength will be spent uselessly, for your land will not yield its produce, and the trees of the land will not yield their fruit.
Deuteronomy 28, 23 and 24. And thy heaven that is over thy head shall be brass, and the earth that is under thee shall be iron. Is that it?
Mm-hmm. Is that 23 and 24?
I think it's hard to read in this translation because the
Okay.
white space starts there, and that's
Okay.
when
Yeah. So
maybe not. Maybe it's the Lord shall make the rain of thy land powder and dust. From heaven it shall come down upon thee until thou be destroyed.
Right. So do you notice the correlation between these verses? Both of them say your heaven will be as iron or brass, and your earth that's under you shall be as iron. Now, this specifically refers to a time of famine. When the ground is so hard that it is as iron,
That's hard.
you're not getting much
No.
produce out of the
No.
land. I mean, you're not even being able to break through that soil.
Right.
The ground is so
Right.
hard. Now, do we have record of any famines like this in the Northern Kingdom? how is it that Elijah knew to come before Ahab and say there will be neither dew nor rain until I say so?
Hmm.
How did Elijah know know to say that?
The testimony.
Testimony.
Studying it.
So Elijah knew that famine was what was allotted for this point in time in Israel's history. And it is the most, I mean, the land gave out for bread. He had to go to Zarephath. And the woman said, I'm going to make these cakes for my son, and then we're going to die because the famine was so horrible. You know, God hid Elijah at Cherith, and ravens brought him food. The land was at the point of starvation until, you know, of course, after Mount Carmel, and then there's rain. But at no other point in time do we have famines such as these. There may have been famines, but not this epic famine in Israel's history as it is at this time. So at this point in time, too, and I know we haven't discussed it, I'm just going to mention it real quick. The temple's 12 cubic fillet of gold. The tabernacle represented Israel's history, as did the temple. And Jeremiah draws attention to this fillet of gold that went through the pillars of Jachin and Boaz. Boaz symbolized the house of David, the patriarch, founding patriarch, and then Jachin, the house of Levi, a founding patriarch. And this fillet of gold represents the house of Ahab, the cursed house of Ahab, another lineage issue for other things down the road. The cursed house of Ahab entering into the sure house of David, which occurs during the reign of Athaliah. Athaliah was Ahab's daughter, who reigned over Judah for 7 years until she is killed, but her children still remain on Judah's throne. So, and what happens when there's only a surviving daughter? When there's only a surviving daughter of a household, what legally happens to those heirs? They become surrogates for the father's house. The ruling with the daughters of, and I'm going to massacre the name, not Zarephath, that's the wrong name. Makur, anyways.
Starts with an M.
Zeopold, daughters of Zeopold. The ruling was that if there are no other sons, that the daughters then become, they stand in the place of brethren or in the place of men. And then they become the legal heirs to that family. So as a lineage, as a legal lineage thing, she therefore transfers the house of Ahab and any legal things with that house then to her children. So you have both the blessings of David and the curse of Ahab in the same household, which is why,
Oh my gosh,
200 years later, you have Micah, who says, you know, I will cut off him that basically steals fields in Samaria. And he's prophesying against the house of Ahab that's been dead for 200 years. But understanding that that house of Ahab still lives within David's lineage helps the prophecy to make sense, because it's not, you know, anachronistic. It's actually still talking about a viable history. All right, so coming back to this. Now we're going to the third 7 times. You're going to find that wild beasts are multiplied. Now, wild beasts, remember, we mentioned before, usually indicate foreign invading armies. They're not native, they're not local. These are going to be Babylon, Assyria, people from lands far away. You're going to also find that Israel loses population. Yahweh is angry with Israel, and the diaspora covenant begins to go into effect. You also have Numbers 33, verses 55 through 56. So Numbers 33 was a very specific instruction where God tells Israel to destroy all the Canaanites' high places, to dispossess them, and to dwell in their place. And Israel is supposed to really erase the memory of the Canaanites.
Mm.
If we today, do you know every time there's an archaeological find and it has something in Hebrew, the Israelis are going, see, we have claim to the land. Every time you have a pagan artifact or something, should it have something that mentioned Philistines, or sort of have something that mentioned Palestine that was 2,000 years old, the Palestinians would be going, see, we have claim to the land.
Mhm.
So by God saying destroy all those artifacts, it was destroying future claims to that land.
Hmm.
But there's a judgment in Numbers 33 because God says, if you do not follow these commands to drive them out of the land, first of all, they will be thorns in your sides. They are going to make your life miserable, which we can see they do that today
Yes.
with all the terrorist attacks. But he says, this is the key. He says, as I thought to do to them, I will do to you.
Mm.
So what is God going to do to Israel? Well, he's going to destroy their high places, which he did so both in Samaria as well as Judah. That means destroy the temple. He is going to destroy their memory in the land. He is going to divide the land and give it to the heathen to dwell there.
Mm.
Ezekiel says that God brought the worst of the heathen to dwell in the land of Samaria. He brought people from Elam. He brought people from all over what would have eventually become Persia, Babylon, took those people, native people, and put them in Samaria. So anytime you have a deportation, it's always bi-directional, taking one group of people out and putting another one in. And you do that because when people are separated from their homeland, they become more docile. They're not fighting for their land. They're not fighting for their freedom. They're simply trying to survive
Yeah.
in a foreign land. So when they're on their land, they're going to fight for it.
Right.
So it's a means of subjugation. So did you have a comment?
No, I'm just blown away.
And
Okay. So now with God just begins to apply numbers, and I call it the effacement judgment. He just begins to apply it at this point in time. It is not fulfilled by any means. Okay, so if somebody wants to read Deuteronomy 28, 25 through 27, and I always start with Leviticus. So we need Leviticus 26, verses 21 through 22.
Leviticus 26:21. If then you act with hostility against me and are unwilling to obey me, I will increase the plague on you 7 times according to your sins. I will let loose among you the beasts of the field, which will bereave you of your children, and destroy your cattle and reduce your number, so that your roads lie deserted.
Okay. And then Deuteronomy 28, verses 25 and 26.
25 and 26 or 25 through 27.
Through 26.
Okay. The seventh day of the festival will be another.
Is that Deuteronomy 28?
Oh, no. Okay. Next.
Deuteronomy 28:25. The Lord shall cause you to be defeated before your enemies. You will go out one way against them, but you will flee 7 ways before them, and you will be an example of terror to all the kingdoms of the earth. Your carcasses will be food to all the birds of the sky and the beasts of the earth, and there will be no one to frighten them away.
Okay, the Hebrew is a little bit different. You will be smitten before your enemies. It says you will be removed to all kingdoms of the earth. And your carcasses will be meat to the beast of the earth, and no man will fail them away. But notice what it says: I will send wild beasts among you, which will rob you of your children.
Mm.
Now, are these wild beasts
Mm.
lions and
Mm-mm.
tigers and elephants?
Mm-mm. Foreign,
We're talking
foreign
about
armies. Yes.
yeah, we're talking about foreign armies.
Okay.
Yeah.
I remember
Wow.
you saying that now.
Yeah, we are talking about foreign armies. And let me give you some examples of this. And I think my eyes must be getting tired. I'm actually going to have to go get my glasses here real quick. Let me go get my glasses just so that my eyes aren't getting too tired.
think we're all tired
Okay, there we
Mhm.
are.
after 8.
Um, just- So we have Isaiah 34:14. No, this isn't it. Hold on. Actually, look at different. Mhm. I think I come back to this a little bit later because I'm not finding. We'll come back to because I do have the verses there. Okay, we'll come back to it in a little bit. All the verses that talk about uh, conquering armies. Let's look at this one. Actually, I have this one. Hosea 13, verse 8. Yeah, this is the one I was thinking of.
And you read it?
Yes.
Like a bear whose cubs have been taken away, I will tear out your heart. I will devour you like a hungry lioness and mangle you like a wild animal.
So,
Mhm.
so I will do it like this. So when God sends Assyria and Babylon, he is sending his beast, calling forth
Mhm.
his beast to render judgment on Israel. And as we saw this morning, that is something that
Mhm.
had been established in the Noahic covenant that God would do if
Mhm.
humanity killed their brother and ingested animal blood.
Wow.
So that is a direct, so not only does it come through the Noahic covenant, but even more than that, it comes through disobeying, giving your seed to Moloch,
Yeah.
all of those other commands as well that are violated. All right, so now, all right, so Israel begins to lose population. This is also where we find Isaiah 9, chapter, let's read 11 and 12. Isaiah chapter 9, verses 11 and 12.
What makes you think I want all your sacrifices, says the Lord. I am sick of your burnt offerings of rams and the fat of fattened cattle. I get no pleasure from the blood of bulls and lambs and goats. When you come to worship me, wait a minute. When you come to worship me, you ask you to parade through my courts with all your ceremony. Is that where I stopped?
So is that Isaiah 9?
Yeah. You said, wait a minute. Okay. Next.
You're good.
I thought, no.
9 verse what?
11.
Yeah. Sorry.
Therefore,
You're good.
therefore, the Lord shall set up the adversaries of Rezin against him and join his enemies together.
Right. So
I missed
this
that one.
this Isaiah 9 takes place at this point in time. Rezin, Syria, and Assyria, two,
Mhm.
it sounds alike, but they're two different nations,
Oh,
are all occurring at this one point in time in this very unstable political situation that has taken place in the Near East.
hmm.
So, so anyway, so this is kind of the historical background as it goes on. Now, the next verse we're going to read does not have a parallel in Leviticus. This is more detail that is given to us specifically in Deuteronomy. You can do this, Jerry. Okay, Deuteronomy 28, verses 27 through 29.
You do. Deuteronomy 28:27. The Lord will smite you with the boils of Egypt, and with tumors, and with the scab, and with the itch, from which you cannot be healed. The Lord will smite you with madness, and with blindness, and with bewilderment of heart.
Okay, so we're in the time of Isaiah with this. Is there anyone in Isaiah's lifetime that had a boil of which he was told he would not recover from, and that he should set his house in order because the sentence was not a time of healing? But God had mercy.
Give him 10 more years.
That's right. And he healed him instead.
So you're saying that, okay, based on the verse, if they speak not according to the testimony, there's no light in them, that the prophets, it wasn't like, and I'm trying to get this right in my head, it's not Jehovah giving them these words to say, but they know this through the testimony. They know what's going to happen through knowing the testimony, so they tell the people. I mean, where does God fit into that?
They look to the testimony.
Okay.
The testimony is like the constitution, the law of
Yeah.
prophecy.
Do
God-
you get where I'm coming
Yes,
from? It's not like I
totally.
always thought, like, where the Lord came to me and said,
Right.
say this to Israel. They're knowing this because they see the signs, they see the disobedience, so they know
What's coming.
what's coming.
Right.
Okay.
They
Wow.
have a guidebook.
Wow.
They have a guidebook.
That's a game changer.
It is. Now, God can still inspire
Uh-huh.
beyond what's written, but it will never contradict what's written.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Right. Then if there's something contradictory, it's not according to the testimony, and there's no light in it. Okay.
And that's why you see Jeremiah. He initially went along with Hananiah. What did he say? 2 years and Israel will be restored, all this. Initially, Jeremiah was like, oh, yeah, that sounds really good. I like this idea. But then later on, God shows him, or he looks at the testimony and he goes, no, it says 7 times. He's not right. So then he prophesies against Hananiah because he realizes that Hananiah is trying to give the people false hope, and that is the worst thing. I mean,
Yeah.
God despises false hope.
Right.
He despises people that say you will live when the sentence is dead.
Right.
He's like, no, you warn these people, you tell them that the sword is coming,
Mhm.
so they have the opportunity to repent and that they don't trust in their sins.
Right.
And say, oh, God, he doesn't really care about us anymore. Who knows if God exists? Let's just, let's have some fun.
Well, it sounds like today.
I know, very similar. So that's the first part. The second part of this, and we may, depending on how far you want to go tonight, we may stop after this part. Read that second verse again, verse 29.
28.
Mm-hmm.
And you will grope at noon as the blind man gropes in the darkness, and you will not prosper in your ways, but you shall be oppressed and robbed continually with none to save you.
What does it mean that Israel would grope in the darkness as at noonday? Remember in the plagues of Egypt, the sun went
Mhm.
down at noonday and it was cloudy. You had 3 days, two and a half actually, but you had 3 days of darkness. All of the curses and the plagues of Egypt are like rendered on Israel. Israel groping at noonday is the idea that truth has been hidden. What did God do with the testimony? Where did he put the testimony? Inside the Ark of the Covenant, behind the veil, where the people could not see it. Only the high priest had access to it. And it was veiled, hidden from sight. This causing the people to grope at noonday, where they do not have their sight, where they cannot see. And we'll go through some of these verses, and then this will be where we end after this one tonight. There was a commission that God gave to Isaiah, and Isaiah is the most misunderstood book of Scripture, because when you read the purpose of the book of Isaiah, it totally changes how you understand it. So turn to Isaiah chapter 6. Somebody wants to read this. And the verses, read the whole thing, but the verses that we're going to look at is going to be verses 9 through 10.
Okay, got it.
Okay.
Also, I heard the voice of the Lord saying, "Whom shall I send, and who will go for us?" Then said I, "Here am I, send me." And he said, "Go and tell this people, hear ye indeed, but understand not, and see ye indeed, but perceive not." And 10.
Mm-hmm.
And make the heart of this people fat, and make their ears heavy, and shut their eyes, lest they see with their eyes, and hear with their ears, and understand with their heart, and convert and be healed.
So what is the purpose of the book of Isaiah? To hear but not understand, to see but not perceive, to make the heart of the people fat, their ears heavy, so that they close their eyes, so that they do not see, so that they do not hear, understand, convert, and be healed. How did Isaiah do this?
Oh my gosh.
First of all, little books are a little bit easier to understand because Micah is pretty straightforward. Amos is pretty straightforward, but Isaiah, he has a lot. Isaiah says the same thing like over and over and over again. So you might have 3-4 prophecies saying the same thing with different factors each time. And Isaiah is the book that more than any of the others is used to justify much later doctrines. So the other thing that Isaiah does is he mixes up the chronology of the testimony so that it appears in some long distant future, at the restoration, the point of redemption, there's going to be this massive Holocaust. There's going to be this day of Yahovah way off in the future. That's not what the testimony says, as we will see. So he mixes up the chronology of the prophetic law. Every word he speaks is true and it is accurate. But he tells you in the beginning, look to the law and the testimony to understand this book. And he says this book will be as one that was sealed, that will be given to this person and say, read it, for I can't understand it. Help me understand. Why? Because he mixes up the chronology of the testimony.
I was just fixing to say, can you explain it to me?
So by mixing it up, You think,
Mhm.
and he says in that day, that's how he
Mm.
does, he changes and he shifts from one subject to another, or one time period to another. He says, in this day, this will happen. His words are true, they are correct, but the chronology is not. So he's made the heart heavy. Now let's look at a few things about this noonday. Let's look at the curse of noonday, where they will grope in at noonday as the blind grope in darkness. Look at Isaiah 29, verse 10.
For the Lord has poured over you a spirit of deep sleep. He has shut your eyes, the prophets, and he has covered your heads, the seers.
Isaiah 69, 23.
Isaiah
Not in
69.
Psalm 69, 23. Sorry about that. Okay, they say this, the sound is good, but they're not picking up K.
I know, I'm reaching over back to her now. 69.
And after you read this, and you finish with these, I want to know how this ties into Psalm 91 and the don't be afraid that those who trust in Jehovah.
Right.
So you said 69.
Yeah, 69, verse 23.
Okay. Let their eyes be darkened that they see not, and make their loins continually to shake.
So again, we have this idea of darkening of truth, of
Mhm.
hiding of truth. You also have, this is another one, Psalms 91,
That's where I was going.
Right.
It's like,
verses 5 and 6.
what's this? This is more positive though.
Right.
Thou shalt not be afraid for the terror by night, nor the arrow that flieth by day, nor the pestilence that walketh in darkness, nor for the destruction that wasteth at noonday.
Now, what this says, the Septuagint renders that, or the calamity and the evil spirit at noonday.
Hmm.
So remember, God says he sent a spirit to close our eyes so that we do not see. Isaiah 42, verses 16 and 17.
Isaiah 42:16. I will lead the blind by the way they do not know. In paths they do not know, I will guide them. I will make darkness into light before them, and rugged places into plains. These are the things I will do, and I will not leave them undone. They will be turned back and be utterly put to shame, who trust in idols, who say to molten images, you are our gods.
So, what happens when you lead the blind by a way they don't know?
They stumble, they trip.
They fall.
Yeah. They fall.
There's going to be some pain along the way.
Mm.
So God does this as an act of judgment. He's not leading a people who can see. Israel has become blinded. And he's not taking them, if he's taking them by a way that they do not know, are they walking in Torah? They're walking outside of Torah. Because the path that they knew, the light he had given to them was Torah. So when they depart from that, they're blinded and they go by a totally different way. And you have, let's skip ahead to one point that Isaiah makes. We read Isaiah 29, 13, and 14 earlier, but here it states also that the precepts and the fear towards Yahweh is taught by the precepts of men. It's not taught by the precepts of Yahweh, but by the precepts of men. So that blinds Israel.
That's not a good place to be at all.
So when you look to other sources for the basis of your doctrine rather than the Torah, you end up in a totally different place.
Oh, I'm getting an epiphany.
This might-
And
Sure.
it's Psalm 91. It's like, okay, so this is telling you the remedy for that is dwelling in the secret place of the Most High. And I'll say of Jehovah, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God, in Him shall I trust. And He delivers you from all these things. And you don't be afraid of all these calamities because you're trusting in Him. Here's the thing, the epiphany, it's the name. Because He hath set His love upon me, therefore I will deliver Him. I will set Him on high because He hath known my name. Do you know how many times as a Christian I memorized this and
But God didn't give up on you.
no,
You didn't give up on God.
no.
So you're there.
Yeah.
You are
Well,
there.
hadn't arrived, but I'm
Well,
getting
you know, I think
This is
we
an
are
epiphany.
coming. We are coming ever closer every day. It's exciting.
yeah.
It's very exciting. So then you find. Let me just read this to you. This is Amos, okay, and I'm just going to read it because it's lengthy. I'm not going to read the whole thing. Amos chapter 8, verse 7 says, Yahweh has sworn by the excellency of Jacob, I will never forget any of their works. Shall not the land tremble for this, and everyone mourn that dwells therein? And it shall rise up wholly as a flood, and it shall cast out and drown as by the waters of Egypt. And it shall come to pass in that day that Jehovah God, that I will cause the sun to go down at noon, and I will darken the earth on a clear day. And I will turn your feast into mourning, and all your songs into lamentation. I will bring upon sackcloth on all your loins, and baldness on every head, and I will make it as a mourning of an only son, and at the end of it as a bitter day. Now this is the end of it, becomes a bitter day. Behold, the days come, says Jehovah, that I will send a famine in the land, not a famine of bread, nor thirst of water, but for the hearing of the words of Jehovah. This is the darkness of noonday. This is the
Wow.
sun going down at noonday instead of the words of Torah. Whose words do we hear? The words of Isaiah. You know, the words of Isaiah take precedence over what's written in Torah. So, and they shall wander from sea to sea, and from north even to east and west. They shall run to and fro, seeking the word of Yahweh, and they shall not find it. Now, this again will correspond in Deuteronomy 32 to the hiding of the face. Yahweh sent His word to Israel until the first 70 years. When Israel comes back to the land during the Second Temple period, Daniel states that 70 years are allotted on Judah and Jerusalem to sanctify the covenant and to seal the testimony. And we know that from the testimony of Ezra and Nehemiah, they don't do that. Instead of obeying and accepting their punishment and the correction and learning from that and correcting themselves, they come back to the land in 515 and they commit all the sins of their forefathers. So in that first 70 years, they never sanctify the covenant. They never sanctify Yahweh. And because of that, you find that, again, there's more diasporas. There's another judgment that comes later on. But you also find that it is after that initial reestablishment on the land, Haggai and Zechariah are the last two prophets that hear the word of Yahweh. After that, there is no more word of Yahweh. It's done. That He's hiding His face from Israel to see what their end will be. So we are beginning the period of the hiding of the face, but it's not in full. Amos is telling us that this is coming. You know, you're bringing this own judgment upon yourselves by following after falsehood. So, and in many ways, all of this is really just self-inflicted.
Mm.
You know, yeah, it's God's judgment, but it's really kind of our own judgment.
We're making a choice.
Exactly. Does that mean? No. I'll go back in. So anyways, if you skip down to verse 9, chapter 9, verse 4, says, and though they go into captivity before their enemies, I will command the sword and it will slay them. And I will set my eyes upon them for evil and not good. So it says they're going to go into captivity. So this judgment, this coming judgment, doesn't necessarily occur in the land of Israel. It's occurring when they're in the land of their enemies and the sword slays them. And we're going to see this as we go through the testimony as we continue on a little bit later. It says, and Yahweh hosts who touches the land and it shall melt, and those that dwell in there will mourn, and it shall rise up like a flood. So anyways, Amos in chapters 8 verse 7 through 9 verse 10, excuse me, his testimony totally follows the chronology of Deuteronomy 28. Amos and Micah are the two prophets that spoke before the sun went down on the prophets. So when you follow Amos and Micah, it's chronological. After Isaiah, nothing is chronological. Intentionally, Jeremiah, they will give, both Ezekiel and Jeremiah will give dates. In this year, the word of Yahweh came to me. But sometimes the 34th year comes before the 27th year. And they are intentionally mixed up so that you really have to seek and find if you want to know truth. You're not just going to get it because you want it. If you want it, you know.
You have to seek it.
That's right.
You have to search it out.
That's right.
You have to be on your face.
And you have to restore the order.
Right.
You know, I mean, we have the ability today to make this job is so much easier. We can cut and paste. You know, we can cut the 37th year and paste it before the other year in a Word document and see, oh, okay, this is the way it's supposed to go.
Wow.
How much easier that is than the tools that our forefathers had to work with.
Yeah.
So we have the tools. So that's where we're going to end tonight, just because it's very lengthy. And then maybe tomorrow afternoon, we'll see how much further we get into this. But I noticed the chronology holds. The sun goes down at noonday. And let me give you the exact date that the sun goes down. It goes down in 745 BCE. That is when Isaiah 6 was written. Was in 745 BCE. And right about that time, Naphtali is deported. And it was the very last year of Uzziah, the year that Uzziah died. So all of this, you know, the sun didn't go down previous. It didn't go down in the days of Ahab. It didn't go down in a previous epoch. So again, just as you look through this, notice the chronology. Notice that nothing happens out of sequence with this. So anyways, okay, about 10 inches. Oh goodness, Cindy. Cindy says that she got about 10 inches of snow. So, I hope you are staying warm.
Makes me not feel so bad about
I
it being
know.
chilly here.
I know.
It's cold here, but not that cold.
So, okay, so we are going to call it a night. I'm going to come around and shut the video off. Thank you guys for joining us. We will be here 10:30 tomorrow morning for the Shabbat service, and I hope you guys will join us then. Shabbat Shalom.
Yes. Shabbat Tov.